Welcome back, everybody, to this final Daniel installment of Between Two Sermons.
All right.
Way to go, Rob.
Yeah, we did it.
Yeah, we did it.
Well, you did it. Pete did it. We did it.
That's right. And also, if I'm not mistaken, it's also the Christmas plaid edition of Between Two Sermons as well.
We're tipping into that season.
That's right. A little preemptive Christmas for you all, just because we know we want to bring joy into your lives. So here you go.
And this is a joyful sermon.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
That's irony.
Yeah. So, Rob, loved how you broke this passage down for us, Daniel 12, and it's a tough one to preach,
Very much,
because there's so much jam-packed into there, and you're mining all of these nuggets for us in there, and it's really tough to do because you could preach. I think we were just talking before. You could preach 4 sermons.
You could,
on this particular passage.
There's probably 2 or 3 or 4 main theological topics that are planted here: the resurrection of the dead, double resurrection, the ultimate judgment of evil in the world, in the grand scheme. Those are huge subjects.
Right.
The explosion of knowledge. I mean, so those alone all could be their own subjects.
Yeah, the abomination that causes desolation.
Yeah, which is a theological concept which is mentioned here. And some people never heard of it. Some of us have heard of it. And it's actually used a number of times in Scripture. It's used even twice in the book of Daniel. Jesus is a long way from Daniel. He uses it. So there's a lot here. Yeah,
I love the way you use that illustration of the telescope too during that to talk about that.
Yeah, it's important to think about that. And the Bible is a big book, 66 books, Old Testament, 2 covenants, but really in many ways, as we have the privilege of living when we do, and the whole Bible is written and it's been around for a long time. People have written about it, that it is a unified whole. And there's things that are said, and many of us know this, but I mean that are planted seeds because the author knew the end from the beginning.
Right.
That you see flower and develop later on in the Bible, and you see it, especially I think in this chapter, because Daniel's book, like the book of Revelation, they're companion books, is talking about the grand plan of God.
Yeah. And so the first point of yours in this passage is to die to our own vision.
Yeah.
And how did you get that from this particular
it's a good question.
passage?
As you know, from being a preacher as well, you when you look at the Scripture, some are easier. Some passages of Scripture are easier to sermonize, or make application. Some are harder, and this is very theologically dense. And so there's a lot of things I could just teach the theology, and that's not bad. But I'm thinking, what is here that could be applicable, that is true of this man named Daniel? It seemed, when you think about there's 2 or 3 times, and there's just this one passage where he says, I heard what you said, but I don't understand it. And it's so, and even the angel or whoever's talking to him says, just roll up the scroll and be done and go to rest. Almost like it's overwhelming.
Right.
And so there's one sense of which the knowledge that God brings sometimes is overwhelming, but clearly also, back to your question, the death of a vision, I think we're seeing, based upon the math of, Daniel's near the end of his life, the 3rd year of Cyrus, it's said in Daniel chapter 10, which of this is part of the same vision, that we know that some of the people of Israel had returned. Cyrus had already given, basically said, hey, anybody wants to go home, which was huge. Daniel had waited his whole life, maybe 60 years as a servant in the king of Babylon and now Persia. He was waiting for the promised return. We mentioned this way back in the first sermon. If people would remember, that Jeremiah prophesied and Daniel said, after 7 years, we're going to go back. They did. People were living there for maybe a handful of years, and Daniel would have gotten reports, but it wasn't what he thought it was. It's like people, I don't know, we go back and visit something that was important in our lives and realize it isn't what we thought it was going to be. In this case, Daniel's hope, maybe for most of his life, was that he was going to see the return of people to Israel, to the glory days to be restored, and it turns out it wasn't the case. And Daniel is both. There's a lot of encouraging truth here, but there's certainly the death of a vision of it wasn't going to. God's plan was not going to be meted out the way He thought it was going to be meted out.
Right, right. And yet, in the midst of that, he's given a sense of hope in the midst of it too, because He's given a vision, a new vision for the future that's going to be that's going to be different in a good way than what he's experienced.
Yes.
And so that's why I think you transition to this idea of clinging onto the promises of God, or really internalizing those promises of God in our lives.
And it's funny how they're right there. I think the very first verse says, Michael something, the time of great distress which has not been seen in the entire world. I mean, it almost couldn't be worse news. Like, think of whatever you want to think of, it's worse than that. But then right there, even in the first 4 verses of this chapter, there's 2 mammoth promises that says, all is not lost, and God will ultimately make things right. God will ultimately judge the evil in the world, even if you and I don't see it in our lifetime. And He will set things right. And those who are, I forget what they call them, the wise, they will shine like the sun, and they will lead others to righteousness. And then the very last verse of the whole chapter, it says, Daniel, take a break. The revelation is over, but you will rise to your inheritance. So there's the promise. And that's huge to say, even though life doesn't often make sense, and sometimes it does seem, much of the book is that evil is winning the war, there's clear promises here that God will ultimately judge evil in a very decisive way.
Right.
And the righteous, the saved, however you want to call it, you will rise again.
Yeah, those are promises to cling to in our lives, because I think all of us, at some level or another, we yearn for that. We yearn for evil to be just banished, and we yearn for new life in our own lives, I think.
And to know, that there's I don't know if I mentioned in the sermon, but one of my favorite verses are quotable verses, 1 Corinthians 2, the eye has not seen, the ear has not heard, neither has it entered into man or mankind's mind, people's mind, the things that God has prepared for them. Well, what a great promise. We're trying to say, God has a plan.
Yeah.
And sometimes maybe even back to apocalyptic literature, it's so we think, why all these symbols? Well, in strange visions, and I think part of it, like this man hovering over the water in this verse, with a linen turban or linen cloak on, with his hands raised. You think, what is that? And I think part of it, at least, is it's a dimension of reality that is something that's beyond our imagination. So it's the writer is sort of condescending to our understanding, but it tells you that the promise is it's going to be something beyond our imagination. When you say to someone, what's that going to be like? It's beyond your imagination. I think that's what the writer's saying.
Yeah. Let's take just a brief detour, because we can. And let's just talk briefly about timing of all of this. Because no one knows. I mean, certainly we don't know. But there is some clues in this passage that would let us know, well, maybe some of the timing of this seems to line up with what we're experiencing today in some way. So even when we talk about that, what verse is it?
And in verse 4.
Verse 4, where he's talking about, and people will travel across the whole world.
People will go here and there in search of knowledge. Just a half a verse, but I this isn't my insight, but I've come to appreciate it. But many people, biblical scholars, past and present, have just looked at just one half a verse, even long before today, Daniel 12:4, and say one of the signs. And it was probably people were writing this before the 21st century. One of the signs of the end times, or the time at the end, which is being talked about here, those are terms coming out of this passage, is the explosion of knowledge. It's hard to even imagine, the day that we're living in right now, the 2025 year, what's happening. I mean, people are saying things that you and I will live long enough to see if they're right. No, sometimes they say, well, someday there will be, people will fly, and you think, well, that won't be in my lifetime.
Right.
But, people would say things in the past, before there was ever an automobile or an airplane or the internet. But now, artificial intelligence is just one prominent one. They're saying life will be radically different in 5 to 10 years.
Right.
In ways that are, whether it's robotics or the excess of knowledge or the changing of the labor force or, warfare, whatever.
Yeah.
These are things that the things that are being said, as I said, if even 25% of them were true, it would almost appear that the world would be not really most recognizable in the way that it is today.
Yeah. So whether it's AI, talking about travel, like Daniel could not have imagined that there would be people jumping on planes going around the world. What in the world is that? Like he would have no concept for that, or the fact that people could even if we don't talk AI yet, if we're just talking the amount of knowledge we have at our fingertips.
Totally.
Kings didn't have this amount of knowledge. I mean, they didn't have anywhere close to this amount of knowledge in their fingertips that we carry around in our pockets.
Yeah, and that's only 20 less years old.
Right.
So yes, there's been, already, just talking about your smartphone.
Yeah.
You and I have access to far more knowledge than even if we were super smart and had nothing to do with our time, and a job or a family. We could never even get close to absorbing the knowledge that's in your fingertips.
Right.
So that's a sobering, humbling, and disturbing thing.
Yeah. So it is a sobering thing. It also could be an inspiring thing to know that maybe we're closer to the end than the beginning, for sure.
Yeah, no question.
I don't know what that. I don't know what the timeline is.
That's right.
It should cause us to have a solemnness about it, I think. But also, I like how you ended this, which was, you still have a job to do, essentially.
Yeah, and
you still have important work to do.
I mean, it says, again, what Daniel knew in his day and what the people who were reading this book for the first time, maybe it was years later, knew, and what we know, or people on the other side of the resurrection of Jesus, it's different. But, you look at it as a compounding truth. And it says in this passage, and addition to all the other things we were talking about, resurrection and ultimate judgment, and it talked about these two kinds of people. Very straightforward. There's the wise and the unwise, and the people might call them the saved and the lost. There's different ways of talking about them. Those who accept God and those who reject God. And for those who are wise, or who, let's say, like Daniel as an example, who accept it, he says, you will... your job is to lead, think about the language there, many to righteousness. Well, I wouldn't need to do that in heaven because everyone there has perfect righteousness. So if, it still seems to be saying in Daniel's day, your job, and you will be like stars that shine in the sky, which is, of course, a beautiful image.
Yeah.
But which would tie with Jesus' words of, being light of the world.
Yeah.
So it says that even though Daniel had to die to his vision, life didn't work out anywhere near the way I thought it was. In fact, it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. That's what Daniel's book says. He in himself was never going back. He died to that vision. But there were great promises, and even for an 80-year-old man, there was still work to do. And he's the one, you could say, that through God used to lead Nebuchadnezzar to Christ, if that's how we understand that passage. It's huge, and his work wasn't done, and that's encouraging. That you and I, all of us, we and wherever however we don't have to get on a plane.
Right.
We don't have to do, because there's lost people everywhere. We live in a world that, even though there's more and more and more and more answers to questions, there seems to be less clarity on what is true, and people knowing God's love. So no one needs to drift far from home to find people who don't know the grace of God, the true love and righteousness of Christ, which is a powerful thing.
Yeah, that is, and that just reminds me of maybe where we should end this series in a reflection, and that's what are those promises that you need to cling to during this season.
Yeah.
As we kind of exit this time through this book, what are the promises? But I love the two that Rob pointed out. I think those two that you pointed out for us are great places to start. Maybe it's something other than this.
Yeah.
But the fact that God will eventually judge evil. Do you need to cling to that one today? And if so, how do you need to cling to that?
And
one?
how does it help?
Yeah, how does that help?
Yeah,
that's a great question.
Yeah,
and that there will be a resurrection.
Right.
Do you need to cling to that one today? And why? And what hope does that give you to cling to that?
To know that we will, I think at 1 John, again, Daniel wouldn't know this, but when we see him, we shall be like him.
Right.
For we shall see him as he is. It's kind of Bible language, but it's a powerful statement to say we will see our Savior. And by the time we see him, we will be, as Paul even says earlier, transformed to be like him. Yes. Not only everlasting life, but that's not just a time reference. It's we'll have a quality of life and beauty that's beyond our imagination. And that's a beautiful thing. That's a wonderful promise.
It is.
And how might that promise, I don't know, soften my edges in this world today to help me say, I don't have to be perfect. I'm not going to hit all the marks. I'm not going to be a perfect mom or a perfect friend, or I might fail in my job or be disappointed. But I have a lot to live for, and we have a great calling, and we have a great future.
Yeah,
and it's not superficial. It's not pie in the sky. It's a true reality that we can look forward to.
Yeah, that's a great way for us to end this. So thanks again, Rob. Appreciate you.
Amen.
And appreciate you joining us on Between Two Sermons. We're going to take a break for the Advent series as we experience Advent as a church, but we'll see you back here in the beginning of the new year. So we look forward to starting a brand new series then. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you back here in the beginning of the year.